Now, I've long said that Tyson Fury is a master of mind games. But in recent videos, I've been entertaining the possibility that he may have met his match in the mind game department in Oleksandr Usyk. I encourage all of you to go watch this interview with Usyk on his YouTube channel. The channel's called Usyk17. And in this interview, you're going to get an insight into Usyk's psychology. And Usyk also gives, let's say, a psychological assessment of Tyson Fury. He explains why he thinks Fury does certain things, talks a certain way, and he also explains how he's reacting to Fury's antics and trash talk and so on. Now, one of the things I found interesting in this interview is that Usyk continuously refers to Tyson Fury as Luke Fury. This is something we saw Dylan White do, let's say a year or so ago. He was constantly calling Tyson Fury Luke, and maybe even further back than that. Oleksandr Usyk's doing the same. He says that when the cameras are rolling, he's Tyson Fury. But when the cameras stop rolling, he becomes Luke Fury. And again, he's giving this psychological assessment of his opponent. I think that Oleksandr Usyk is supremely confident. I mean, if you look at his career to date, never mind what a man says, look at what he does. It shows you how confident he is. It shows you how confident his team is. This is a guy who fought for the world title in his 10th professional fight. Most fighters, they're not going to fight for world titles until they're at least in the high teens in terms of number of fights, if not more than 20 fights. I think Tyson Fury had about 23 or 24 fights by the time he fought Klitschko. Now, obviously, with a lot of these Eastern European guys, they have an enormous number of amateur fights. And certainly in the case of Usyk, he fought in the WSB, which is like a semi-pro type situation. So they don't need to be developed as much once they turn pro. That's why they can challenge for world titles much earlier. But also, when they're fighting in all these elite competitions in the amateurs, they're fighting the best in the world back to back to back to back. And so when they turn pro, it's almost as if they want to keep that going. They want continuity between the level of opponents they were fighting in the amateurs and in the WSB and the level of opponents they're fighting in the pros. And they keep that same energy, that same mindset of wanting to fight the best. The Western fighters get more caught up in boxing politics, it seems, than the Eastern European fighters. Because again, if you look at Lomachenko, I think he challenged for the world title in his second pro fight. And he's wanted to go for the best fighters back to back to back. That's what Lomachenko's been trying to do. The same situation with Artur Beterbiev. He wins a world title very early on in his career, and he's trying to go for the best all the time. Even more so with Oleksandr Usyk. So they have a mindset which is a bit different. Maybe it's not as concerned about the commercial aspect. Obviously, they want to get paid. But perhaps their philosophy is, if I fight the best back to back to back, and I believe in my skills, I believe in my ability, I'm going to get paid anyway. So never mind building fights or getting involved in the politics where we're trying to freeze certain people out. I mean, you look at Errol Spence with PBC. They have actively tried to freeze Terence Crawford out for a number of years. That is obviously not helpful to boxing as a sport. Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder were doing something similar with Anthony Joshua when he was still unbeaten. They were actively trying to freeze him out of the heavyweight picture. They were more concerned with winning a popularity contest against Anthony Joshua than actually stepping in the ring with him at that time. It's only since AJ has suffered his third professional defeat that either one of them seemed particularly enthusiastic and particularly keen about getting Anthony Joshua in the ring. Now, I'm not saying that either one of them was scared of Anthony Joshua, but it's the mindset of risk-reward. It's the mindset of winning the popularity contest. And Mayweather, I know I'll talk about him a lot in this regard, I do think he's to blame for a lot of all this. Because under the Mayweather era, or during the Mayweather era, it was all about preserving the unbeaten record. It's not that Mayweather was afraid of people, but he just understood the value of this unbeaten record. And him and certainly his backers, Al Heyman and so on, they got this preserving the O down to an absolute science in terms of picking the right fights at the right time in order to maximize reward and minimize risk. See, this is the thing about Mayweather. As great a fighter as he was, he understood his own mortality. I never believed that he was an invincible fighter, like so many of his fans did. If he was an invincible fighter, then he wouldn't have needed to choose his fights so carefully. He wouldn't have needed to do that. He would have just been willing to fight any man, anytime, back to back to back top guys. That's what he would have done. But he didn't do that. Tyson Fury hasn't done that. Deontay Wilder hasn't done that. Anthony Joshua, I want to say, attempted to at one point in his career, but he wasn't good enough, obviously, to become undisputed while trying to fight the best batter. He fell short, and he's got 3 losses. But now we have Oleksandr Usyk, who is attempting to do that. He has that old school mentality. I think he's, as I say, brought the mindset of the amateur competition through to the professional game, where he's not thinking about winning popularity contests and freezing people out and the perception of the fight. He's not thinking about any of that. He's just thinking, I believe in my skills. I believe in my ability. I want to fight the best, same as I did in the amateurs, same as I did in the WSB. Let's do it here in the pro game. And I can only applaud him for being that old school throwback kind of fighter. And, I often talk about confidence and how the likes of Tyson Fury has elite level confidence, right? Even Deontay Wilder's got tremendous confidence and belief in his ability. But there are levels. And Oleksandr Usyk, as far as I'm concerned, is the top of the pile in terms of confidence. Never mind what a man says. Look at what he does. Look at his actions. I think Tyson Fury is a bit more emotionally erratic than Oleksandr Usyk. Tyson Fury is a guy who's up and down. And when he's down, I think Tyson Fury has a lot of demons. He has a lot of doubts. But when he's up, he feels supreme. Oleksandr Usyk, to me, comes across as a much more balanced individual who's always up in terms of his confidence. He's always up. And from a psychological perspective, this is a very difficult man to defeat, evidently, because he's still got that O without really trying to preserve it. He hasn't been managing his career in such a way that he's trying to maximize the amount of time that he stays unbeaten. No, he's like, forget about all that. I just want the best. He fought in the World Boxing Super Series. He didn't have to fight in that tournament. And he only had 2 unifications in that tournament, by the way. He didn't fight Krzysztof Glowacki for the world title in the World Boxing Super Series. That was outside of it. Same with the Tony Bellew fight. And of course, same with his heavyweight fights. So this is a guy who isn't messing around people. This is a guy who's very, very serious. And this interview here gives you an insight into his mentality, the way he thinks, why he's so confident. Now, one thing I will say about the interview, which might give the Tyson Fury crowd some extra confidence, is that Usyk is talking about retirement in this video. The way he comes across is it's as if the Fury fight is the only fight he really cares about anymore in boxing. And perhaps once he gets through with Tyson Fury, win or lose, he may choose to call it a day. And so you do wonder, with a guy who's been boxing for so long, hundreds and hundreds of amateur fights, WSB, cruiserweight undisputed, heavyweight unified, never mind the physical toll that boxing takes on you, but the mental toll in terms of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Usyk talks about wanting to spend time with his kids, because the last training camp that he did for the Anthony Joshua rematch, he was away from his family for something like 6 months, and he was only talking to them over Skype or Zoom. And he says that's not how he wants to live his life. He just wants to live a normal life. He's definitely thinking about that. So retirement is close. And when you got a guy who's thinking retirement is close, can he really raise his game to the same level as someone who has got several years ahead of them, who's still ambitious? Do you know what I mean? That's definitely something to consider with regards to Usyk's mentality. But maybe he feels like the Tyson Fury fight would be the pinnacle of his career. Maybe this is the top of the mountain. Because, again, once he's undisputed at heavyweight, there's nothing else to achieve in terms of accolades, right? Yeah, there's always going to be another challenge out there. There's always going to be another contender or somebody calling you out. But once you've won all the belts, and he's Ring Magazine champion as well, right? Once you've won all the belts in 2 divisions and you're 36 years of age, why are you continuing? At that stage, perhaps it just becomes about money. If he becomes undisputed heavyweight, I wouldn't at all blame him if he bowed out and retired at that stage. And for me, Oleksandr Usyk is the greatest cruiserweight of all time, based upon resume. I'm not talking about who would beat who in a fantasy matchup between Usyk and Holyfield. Some people even bring David Haye in. David Haye's been saying lately that he thinks, and of course he would say this, and he would believe this, he thinks that he would have beaten Usyk in his prime. Okay, that's cool. In terms of fantasy matchups, we don't know who would have beaten who. We all have our opinions, but we don't know. But when it comes to assessing somebody's resume, it's less based on pure speculation. There's something a bit more tangible there when it comes to comparing resumes. And as far as I'm concerned, Oleksandr Usyk has got a better resume at cruiserweight than Evander Holyfield. I think it's very difficult to argue against that. When Holyfield became undisputed cruiserweight champion, the division was not as deep as when Usyk achieved that same feat. And there also weren't as many belts. The division was quite young when Holyfield became undisputed at cruiserweight. The cruiserweight division's only been around since the 1980s, folks. And also the cruiserweight division limit was lower than it was when Usyk became cruiserweight champion. So all of these things considered, for me, Usyk is the greatest cruiserweight of all time. So he's solidified Hall of Fame, all-time great already. The heavyweight run that he's on will be the icing on the cake. And if he manages to go in there and beat Tyson Fury, hopefully there won't be a rematch. I would like to see a decisive winner first time around and then no rematch. I think rematches, particularly in the heavyweight division, have been hurting boxing. So I'd like to see just one decisive winner, whether it be Fury or Usyk, and then they can move on. But if it's Usyk, I would say based upon beating Joshua and Fury, obviously you have to take into account the fact that Usyk is older than Evander Holyfield when he became heavyweight champion. I think Holyfield won the world title at heavyweight, became undisputed in one fight, beating Buster Douglas when he was maybe 28. I want to say Holyfield was about 28 at the time. And obviously he went on to fight George Foreman. He fought Burt Cooper, Larry Holmes. Then he lost to Riddick Bowe. He came back, had a tune-up against Alex Stewart, which was a rematch. And then he went into the Riddick Bowe rematch and beat Bowe. It would be hard if Usyk were to retire. Let's say he beats Fury. If he retires after that, it would be hard to say he's got a better heavyweight resume than Holyfield. But then again, it depends on what Tyson Fury goes on to achieve. If he loses to Usyk, what he goes on to achieve afterwards. If Fury goes on to become, let's say, a real top all-time great in his own right, then Usyk's win over Fury, if it were to happen, would get better and better. It would age better. And therefore, it would elevate his standing in the all-time great pantheon of heavyweights, right? So that's all to be seen. But as it stands right now, if he were to beat Fury, he's got wins over Fury and AJ. At this stage, you couldn't say, in my view, that that's a better heavyweight resume than Holyfield, because Holyfield's got wins over Riddick Bowe, Mike Tyson, Michael Moorer, Ray Mercer. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit deeper. So anyway, that's all in the future, and it's going to be no easy task, in my assessment, for Oleksandr Usyk to get past the Gypsy King. His team seemed to think it was going to be fairly comfortable, but, I guess they would say that, right? I'll talk about that in a separate video. I think that it's going to be a hotly contested fight, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a majority decision, a split decision or something like that with Usyk and Fury, particularly if Fury is as smart as I think he is in the ring and applies himself in the most effective way, which for me involves using his size. Rather than fighting a purely technical fight, which Fury has done against some bigger heavyweights and some more clumsy heavyweights, against someone like Usyk, I don't think that's the best course of action. I think he's going to need to get down and dirty, rough, and use that size to wear Usyk out. And that's going to mean being aggressive, maybe even having to look a bit clumsy in order to get close and just get his hands on the guy and pin him down, etc. And if he does that, then I'm expecting a competitive fight. I'm certainly not expecting Usyk to just go out there and win easily. If Fury fights in that way, I'm expecting it to be tough for both guys. So anyway, with all that being said, let's hope we see the fight, but I highly recommend this Oleksandr Usyk being interviewed on his own YouTube channel. Make sure you go check it out. I'll leave a link in the description box below. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high-quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and is 100% censorship-free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.